Welcome, everybody, to Ask a CEO Show. I'm Greg Demetrio, your host. My day job is the CEO of Lorraine Gregory Communications, an award-winning marketing agency here in New York. The Ask a CEO Show brings you highlights of CEOs and important executives that are on their own journey to the CEO suite or have gotten there already and how they run their companies. Today, our guest is a master storyteller, a TEDx speaker, and just an all-around nice human being. Doug Thompson is multifaceted, one of those multifaceted people that you love to meet because they have so much going on for them. He has a foundation in technology, especially these days as an artificial intelligence ambassador and technical strategic director for the education team at Microsoft, where he marries his storytelling abilities with opening the world of Microsoft to students, empowering them to create a new world. He's also the founder of Tech Story podcast, and the TheDougThompson Keynote speaker. He's a prolific LinkedIn poster of thoughtful, inspirational, motivational vignettes and stories. Today, the Ask a CEO Show is going to be a little bit different as we try to unpack the who and the what of Doug Thompson and his unique approach to sharing his expertise. Welcome to the show, Doug.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. We'd love to have great conversations. So I'm going to try and keep up with you as we go. But to start the conversation off, I'd really like you to give us your backstory. How did Doug Thompson arrive at today?
Sure. And as a storyteller, I'm doing a very poor job if I don't let you keep up with me. So, we'll make sure you go along for the ride. So, Doug, it's sort of funny. I use Doug Thompson as both an inspiration and sort of a humorous one-liner that comes up because, as I say, anybody could be Doug Thompson. There's an author, there's a mayor, there's some other ones if you do a search for that. But I want to be the Doug Thompson, which along with it comes some baggage of being aspirational to come to be that. And it came along from when I was, I sort of had a reawakening maybe 10, 12 years ago of realizing the skills and special skills I had from a storytelling perspective to coming to where I am today. So it's been sort of a growth path to come along this way.
So you've got a long career at Microsoft, one of the world's largest companies. We don't get a lot of CEOs on the show that have that depth of experience with that big a corporation. Can you tell us what your experience has been like working for a world leader?
Yeah, I've gone through this. We're on our third CEO. We started out with Bill Gates, and then we had Steve Ballmer, and now we've got Satya Nadella. And it's been, the great thing about working at Microsoft is I'm never the smartest person in the room. If I am, I'm in the room by myself. I think, a lot of that. So there's so much knowledge to go around and people, the passion that people have and all that. So it's hard not to be inspired every day when you go to work. It's we've had the transition along with the business model, of when, first to get a PC in every home, then, on Windows and Office on everything through the middle. And now it's sort of gone back to, we want to enable everybody on the planet to do more, right, with this stuff. So we're being a good steward or partner. It's been an interesting journey. I've been in, and you mentioned my title earlier, and I like to joke that's just a fancy title for sales nerd. So as the technical storyteller, that's the nexus of the podcast Tech Story. I use storytelling to convey and demonstrate how business problems can be solved with technology. I never lead with the technology. I want to understand what the business challenges and all are, and thus when I talk to the CEO or I go talk to a director or I go talk to chief marketing officer, any of those people, I need to know what their story is, what their motivation, what the problems and challenges stuff is, and then I can say, yeah, we can do something with that. We can enable some really great things.
Interesting. So in the brief time that I've been following you, I've been moved by the way you interact with your guests on a personal and professional level. You started your career as a corporate trainer. Is that where you began developing your storytelling abilities, or is that a style that was just natural to you?
I think it comes somewhat natural to me, but the reason I say that is I went to a high school reunion. I won't go into how many decades it was, but I went to a high school reunion recently, and we were looking through this book of memorabilia from our high school days. And I came upon this one thing. It was a note for being tardy. And I looked at the description of it, and it says, I was late because a Coke truck dropped all its Cokes on the freeway and blocked it. And I signed it. It was me. So, so I could, even back when I was 17, I was telling stories. And obviously, it was approved. So obviously I did a pretty good job of selling that. So it goes way back. And as a person that likes to coach people and train them, I found that the most impactful way to do that is through stories. So yes, along the training thing, if you listen to your soul and what lights you up, I found, I've got this. And then more recently, as I've been in this role for a while, and what makes me unique in that, the ability to sort of have that longevity is ability to learn these stories that can talk, because technology is getting infinitely more complex, and you add artificial intelligence to it, and it really sort of makes it hard to understand for the normal person. And then my job is to do that translation and to use a story from where my audience is. And that's where I always start my story, is where the audience is, frame of reference or perspective and stuff. And then, as I mentioned earlier, try to take them along on the journey with me.
That's really something, because that's your more business-sided mindset. Mm-hmm. But I think the first time I ran across you was on LinkedIn, and you were doing a shout out to the people you had met that week. Mm-hmm. And you spoke very positively and very glowingly about the encounters and how heartfelt they were. Mm-hmm. And I believe you named those posts. Tell us how that started and the idea behind those types of posts.
Sure. That's Fanatical Friday is the one, because I'm a big fan of these people, and I try to highlight 3 people a week that I've met that I'm a fan of, and I sort of list the reasons why. And I'm very grateful for the opportunities I've come across and the people I've met. And you mentioned sort of the personal piece of that. When you're having these discussions, even a business discussion, it still comes back down to the old saying that you don't buy from companies, you buy from people. Exactly. And really, to get to know people, you have to have that vulnerability. You have to get to know them as a person. I mean, you're not best friends to go out to do these things, but you understand you can get that relationship that goes along. And my thought process was in this. I had sort of a mentor, Brian Schulman, who does a really great job of doing this. And I thought, this is a great thing to do and just highlight these great people other people should know about. So it's sort of about expanding, sharing some great people I have in my network that have been gracious enough to spend some time with me. And for me, it fulfills a personal need to be giving and give to others.
It shows really sincere gratitude, the blessing that you get in the people that you meet. I mean, I always say that my life has been blessed by God because He keeps putting good people in my way.
Exactly.
And I try to respond that way. You're never going to be an island unto yourself. It's all about the people that are surrounding you and how they interact with you.
So I like how you put God puts them in your way. That's a great way to do it. I mean, it's not, they're along the path, and they're there for a reason. Things happen for a reason. Exactly. I just had, I spent last week on vacation, and I was helping my daughter and grandkids and stuff. They had been flooded out in one of the Imelda last year. They live in Southeast Texas. And so they've been living in a rental place, and now more recently in like a 30-foot trailer, and there's 8 of them, 6 kids and 2 adults. And so I spent last week doing some finishing in the house that they were trying to get back in. And, I realized that, and also along the same time, my second father, so it was my best friend's dad, who sort of took my dad's place when my father died when I was in high school, taught me all these carpentry skills. And so I'm thinking it's a very fitting tribute to that man that taught me all these skills that now enable me to help my family get back in and do things. So you talk about things happen for a reason, and you connect the dots looking backwards. That's a great example of taking advantage of people getting in your way, and or being put in your path. So
I think it keeps you grounded. It just keeps you grounded and keeps you humble.
Yes,
because we're not the be all and the end all, either to ourselves or anybody else. So
even when I reach the Doug Thompson status, I still won't be the end all.
So that brings me to the next one. So how did you get started as a speaker, and what are the keynote engagements that you get now? What do they look like?
So, well, lately with COVID, they sort of dried up a little bit with that, but I got started because as part of Microsoft, and even before that, you're representing your products, your technology and all that. So I did a lot of things through the accounts that I had, or partners, or different things that were events that came up that I was able to be a part of, to sort of, here's my niche and here's the story I'm going to tell of that. So I just built upon that, and then I started getting some inbound requests from other companies. Hey, would you, we're having this meeting. Can you sort of talk about AI, or can you talk about, digital transformation or things like that? So through my engagement, it just sort of grew out of that. And the best thing about that is that I can get that connection to the audience. I can get that, you get there's an exchange of energy from the audience to the speaker that you just can't replicate anywhere else. And, it's an honor for for somebody to trust me enough to go do that. And then living up to that expectation, and then getting that energy back from them. Again, it's gratitude. I'm grateful they're spending the time with me, so I give them everything that I have.
Yeah, that's what's missing now, and I sorely miss the interaction, that energy you talk about from the audience to the speaker and so forth. Even these are different. I mean, these are usually, I do these in studio with 2 camera guys and 2 sound guys and a producer and 2 talking heads, and they have this is different. I mean, this is something that was born out of COVID. I mean, we're making it work, and I think working well, quite frankly, because now not only have the video, but we also have the podcast. But it is different. It's something that you yearn for as a human person. You need to be involved with other people. So hopefully, God willing, this COVID thing will pass, and we'll get back to something that's going to look a little like normal. We can get back to meeting with people and having events and all the good stuff that we all value and look forward to. So, Doug, I'm going to break the show for just a minute. We need to pay some bills, so I'm going to take a commercial break, if you don't mind. And we'll just sit here and wait for us to come back, and they'll point a finger at me and say, okay, go back on, and then we'll be back. So hold on, we'll be right back.
We want to thank our sponsor, Lorraine Gregory Communications, for their support. Lorraine Gregory is an award-winning integrated marketing agency, telling personal and brand stories for more than 30 years. They partner with companies, helping them reach the right audience with the right message on the right platform at the right time. Check them out today at lorrainegregory.com.
All right, and we're back with Doug Thompson, the master storyteller and technology expert. Tom, you have a wealth of technological experience and skill, especially with AI. What are some of the most recent trends that you see in the breakthroughs that you can tell us in that world, the AI world?
Oh, they're so numerous. I'll tell you about the ones that I see from my patch on this. Well, I'll start with the security standpoint, because there's so much noise, especially with people working remotely now. The chance to get hacked or probed and all these other things now is greatly expanded. Before, when you went in the office, you had sort of your castle walls around you that protected you, and there was a smaller doorway to guard. Now, basically, the world is the door to get in when you're doing this. If you're at home, on your PC or whatever, you're constantly sort of being attacked or looked at. And so, at Microsoft, we have the benefit of seeing so many different signals and trends going around. You want to learn a lot about security, run Xbox Live for about a week. With the gaming, so you learn a lot of different things about that. So the amount of data that comes in from that is just, you could not humanly parse it and make sense of it. So this is where artificial intelligence and machine learning come in, and this is where they're best, is at taking these vast amount of data, distilling it down to the important things that you want to see, and then you can sort of tie these things together. So, I mean, you just simply the amount of data there there's not enough humans on the planet to get this done in a timely fashion. So this is one area that's really great to do that. Another area would be some of the cognitive services that we have that does like voice to text. So especially in this world now where we're working remotely and you can't necessarily see somebody, the ability to have real-time transcription of a conversation is very powerful, because that enables people that have either a different language, they're not native speakers, or perhaps they have hearing challenges. That enables them to participate as well, and because their values and the contributions are very valuable, and that makes more of an inclusive environment. So that's two of the big things.
I didn't even realize that I'm a user of AI, in that I use the read aloud function in Word.
Yeah.
I'm a writer. I do a lot of writing, and using that tool
Mhm.
My ear hears the mistakes.
Exactly.
So much better than proofreading. I get through it quicker. It's a better
Yeah.
product when I'm done. So thanks for that.
No, you're welcome. Hey, and then I don't know if you saw the new feature where now you can upload an audio file and it'll do the transcription for you.
Exactly correct. I used to be paying a service because
Yeah.
sometimes we'll transcribe these interviews
Mhm.
and I use the service, and now I don't
Yeah.
have to anymore. So it's
Yeah.
really a benefit. So, okay, so in 5 years, what's AI going to look like?
Well, there's always two trains of thought. There's the Skynet version where we're, the robots are trying to kill us, or there's the
Oh, wait a minute.
Star
That's
Trek.
That's my next question. AI is sometimes reminiscent of sci-fi, where life is controlled by computers and technology, and not in a good way.
Yeah.
You believe that there's a danger there's going to be too much AI at some point?
Well, I'll answer your first question. In 5 years, the ideally what would be good, again, then I'll get to your second question. Let's assume it's a good track and going on. What you'll see is more adoption and more of the things that I just talked about the inclusion of things that you could only do from AI, like the transcription, the real-time transcription. And ideally what you want is AI not to replace a human job or do that, is you want to have the human then be you talked about having a service that used to do this. Now you can it automatically does it. And now, use the people that used to do that service can now upskill to something else, like do real-time translations at a conference if we ever get back, or do something else. It's about allowing the human to use the creative part of the brain and get out of those things that can be automated and the lower skill type things that are done. That's where that would be the best balance if we have that. And then the biggest challenge of that is us as humans sort of letting go and trusting that this is what it's going to be, and realizing that it's not here to replace us. It's here to allow us the opportunity to think and grow and use our brain for what we do best. And it's not repetitive tasks.
So there's no boogeyman in the behind the curtain.
Well, ideally not. But there are things that can be done. I mean, there's the if you look at the debacle or the debate about facial recognition and stuff on that, the AI tools and stuff on there aren't by themselves bad. You're right. They serve a specific function. It's the way that they are used that sort of changes, is it good or bad. And I think we need some regulations in place to sort of help curb the attraction of maybe using them for bad. But if you go back to the singularity piece of that, we're nowhere near where even though you can do robotic voices. I saw where they had AI that wrote a story. I saw an article the other day on Medium, I think it was, and this bot wrote this story, but you could still tell it wasn't a human story. It was very mechanical. Grammar was correct, which should be a dead giveaway that it wasn't a human story. But there was not that, there was something missing, that connection. And so we're a ways away from that ability to do that.
Okay, so company culture is an important subject nowadays.
Yeah.
Right? People are always trying to figure out how to make the employees feel better, work better, have a more happy existence. So how do you see AI and storytelling impacting the human culture of a company?
Well, this goes into a broader thing of digital transformation. It's a term that gets thrown around a lot. And in reality, when you're trying to leverage these things and all that, it really needs to be a cultural, organizational change before the technology change really sort of happens. And the reason I say that is, as you get with the AI and you get machine learning and big data, now you need to make sure that everybody has the proper access to that same data so they can do some really cool and creative things with it. It's inclusive. They can, you're all working off the same, the same set of data that you have. It's curated in a way that, again, somebody in research would have, tighter permissions than somebody, say, in sales per se. But it's an organizational change that I don't own the data. I mean, we're breaking down these silos where I don't own this data. The company owns this data. How do we make the best use of it? So that's a cultural change that goes across with that. And then the ability to, again, getting back, can we use this for good? And just because we should do something with AI, should we? We need to sort of look around at You know, if I was going to an emerging market and there was a factory that made widgets and it was really the sole employer for this whole village, is it right to go in and automate that, which would decimate the economy of that village, right? Without some preparation. Okay, how do we upskill them to go do something else?
That's really altruistic, but the question becomes then, how do you maintain that in that industry going forward? Because there's going to be so many temptations to do exactly what you said.
Mhm.
Humans be damned, money is more important. So back to your inference about being regulated or at least issued guidelines, I think that's going to be seriously important going forward, because as time goes by, this AI thing is just like exploding. I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost like it's growing on its own legs, and it could very well fall into a dark hole. And it's something I'm thinking people are a little concerned about. You know, especially in light of all the security issues we have going on today.
Mhm.
You know, it's just an important thing, and I appreciate the fact that you're a professional and you see that already. So, what's next for the Doug Thompson or the ambassador for Microsoft? What's
Well,
coming next? What's coming next for you?
well, you know, I'd like to get back on a stage near you sometime soon to talk about the storytelling. I've got the Tech Story podcast, of which I sort of I enjoy swimming in my love of stories. So I get to talk to some great storytellers. What I really want to do is to, and this is sort of to all the nerds out there that may be listening to this, is that I want to give you that voice. I want to sort of help you have that storytelling ability. Because what I find is you know, these really brilliant people which are making these products and engineers and developers and all that, they're just so. I'll use an example of, I was a mentor at University of Texas, their master's program, and they asked me to come out and speak, and I'm looking at the resumes of all the masters of, you know, data science and all this. I'm having to look up every third word in the dictionary because I really don't understand what's on there. So these people are way smarter than I am. But as I listen to them talk, they could talk to each other very well. When they try to do the part I talk about, telling a story to a business owner that really doesn't care about technology,
Right.
that's where they have a challenge, or even selling their idea to a fellow team members. So it gets back to, I want to help give them that voice and the way to think in story, to say, okay, here's how I would tell this and relate that to make them ultimately more successful.
So, in closing, this should be a good one for you. In
Okay.
closing, I always ask the guests the same variation on the same question. What was the best personal advice you've ever received?
Mm-hmm.
What was the best business advice you've ever received?
The best personal advice was my father. Well, I guess the best business advice from my father says you can earn a living in two ways: with your back or your brain, and I highly recommend the latter. So, you know, having done manual labor all last week, I can really appreciate that. The second one was actually was a lesson. This was a personal lesson that I had back when I was around high school, and it goes back to empathy and being humble. In that I had some friends of mine. We were supposed to go water skiing as during the summer. I went over to their house at the appointed time, and they weren't there. And I knocked on the door, and their mother answered, and I said, what's up? We were supposed to go skiing. Says, and this was probably the hardest decision she ever made. She says, look, they just are tired of being around you because you're sitting there talking about you've got this other boat and you're doing, you know, so it was almost right. I was unaware that I was doing that. And that was a hard message for her to deliver to me, but it did. Now I keep in mind as I go forth and give to other people and do these other things, I think it instilled in me to lead with empathy and think humbly, and to sort of go and do that. So from the more personal perspective, I hope that made me a better person, but it also made me a better listener in that, okay, how can I help these people, as opposed to, again, unintentionally maybe talking about some other stuff that I had.
Those are very interesting. Yeah, I love your dad's, because my dad was in the 8th grade. And the best advice he gave me, he says, spend less than you're making, you'll always be fine.
Yeah,
You know, you take it
exactly.
from the old timers. They knew their stuff for sure.
Exactly.
So, okay, so now one last question, actually, because the advice is fine. Now, our audience is primarily CEOs and people on their way to the C-suite. Now, you're working in one of the largest companies in the world. I equate you to a CEO because it's such a big universe that you work in, right? what advice would you give to somebody either in the C-suite or on their way to the C-suite about how to be a leader?
The best CEOs I've come across, or best C-suite people I've come across, have been fantastic storytellers too. Because as a CEO, you have to have a vision, you have to have these other skills, and the way that you communicate that down through the whole food chain of the company is important. And the ability to tell the same basic story with a different focus for the audience that you're talking to. Develop those skills to do that, because it's all about communication when you're going. The best ones CEOs I had, they could communicate with anybody. It wasn't that they simply communicated with their leadership team or the investors or what have you. They were able to tell that story to a variety of audiences and build those skills. That would be my best advice, because you can learn all the other stuff. You can learn the finance, you can learn these other things. That stuff you can learn, and you can learn the storytelling, but the storytelling will take you so much further.
Yeah, it has to be nuanced based upon who you're speaking to. I think the other day I interviewed a Fortune, not 500, 700, maybe 800. And that was the conversation. The conversations, well, I can talk to my professionals this way. I can talk to my mid-managers this way. And I can talk to my floor staff this way. But I can't give them all this. I can give them all the same content, but I have to do it differently. It was very
exactly.
good. It's a very interesting concept. So listen, I appreciate you being on the show. It's been amazing. I would like you to tell the audience how to get a hold of you, get more information from you, or whatever you would like to tell them at this point. The floor is yours.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. Again, techstorypodcast.com. That's my podcast. I'm most prevalent on LinkedIn, as you found me there. And I'm TheDougThompson on Instagram and Twitter, although I'm not quite as active on those things. But LinkedIn is the best place to get a hold of me.
Okay, so we're coming to the end now, and I want to say one more time, I really appreciate this. The conversation was just flowed. I get so much out of these conversations. That's why I do them. I have a day job. It's running an ad agency. But meeting CEOs and important executives like this, I always wind up taking something away. And that's always my hope that the audience does. And I know for sure today they got that. So thank you, Doug, again. Appreciate you coming on to the show. Audience, please don't miss any of the upcoming Ask a CEO interviews. We'll have CEOs from all industries, all over the world, all over the country, highlighting their journey to the C-suite and what it's like running their companies when they get there. You can visit us on gregscorneroffice.com on YouTube for the video versions, or on all your favorite listening podcast channels. Just search Ask a CEO. And don't forget, if you like the show, subscribe and share far and wide. And thank you so much. We'll see you next time.